In this video, I'll be showing you step by step how to create a freelance contract that keeps you protected. Because as a freelancer, you don't have another company to rely on that negotiates terms on your behalf. That company is you. And as much as we don't want to think about anything going wrong, quite a few things can go wrong along the way. What happens if a client doesn't pay you on time? Or worse, what if a client backs out of a contract halfway through the project? Or maybe a natural disaster strikes.
To a simmer.
Hold that thought, Hazel!
Yeah, there's a clause for that. Whatever the case may be, you can put these clauses in your contract so that no matter what happens, you'll be prepared. Hi, I'm Brant, and this is Indy, a productivity platform to help you manage your entire freelance business from start to finish. You know those guys that want to charge you thousands of dollars to turn you into a freelancing expert? Well, we're doing that for free because we know how challenging it can be out there, and we want to make freelancing simple. So if that sounds like the stuff you want to know more about, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these tips. Having a professional contract is one of the most important things you should do before working with a client. A lot of things can go wrong during a project, so not only does the contract keep you and your client protected, but it also gives you a guide to follow that outlines everything you're willing to do and not do during the project. Now, we're going to start off pretty basic today with the information that absolutely should be in your contract, but you can get even more detailed in the future as your business grows. So here are the top 12 things that should be in each one of your contracts. Number 1 is the name and contact information. Number 2 is the scope of work. Number 3 is how long the term of the contract will last. Number 4 is the payment terms. Number 5 is the termination clause. Number 6 is the cooperation clause. Number 7 is proprietary information. Number 8 is the liability clause. Number 9 is the indemnity clause. Number 10 is independent contractor terms. Number 11 is a general clause that covers things like severability, force majeure, and arbitration. And the last thing you need in every contract is your and your client's signatures. So let's dive in with a simple contract template to help you get started. Okay, now that we're in the contract, the first thing you'll want to include is your client's full name. So for the sake of this video, we're going with Jerry Smith. If this happens to be your client's full name, that's purely a coincidence. I'm just pulling this name out of a hat. But you'll want to include your and your client's full names, phone numbers, and email addresses for both parties. Now, this part's very important. If the name of your business is different from your legal name, then you'll want to put your business name. That's very important because if you put the wrong name down, then the contract doesn't have to be enforced. So just be aware of that when you're filling out the contract. Now, this next section, the scope of work, this is going to be a big portion of your contract. The scope of work breaks down the details and the specifics of the project. So you'll outline what you are doing for the client, what the client has to do, and set up the timelines or the due dates for each deliverable. Now, this section is critical to keeping you protected from additional work that wasn't agreed upon up front. So you want to be very specific about the deliverables you'll be working on. And on that note, things tend to take longer than we think they will. So to be safe, add 1 or 2 extra days into the timeline just in case something unexpected happens. That way you'll still be able to make your deadline. And if it's a long project, you can add in milestones, which break large projects down into tasks that each have their own separate deadlines. This keeps you on target for completing the entire project and also keeps your client updated about the progress along the way. You can even include a limit to how many revisions the client can request. Like, let's say the client can only ask for 2 or 3 revisions. You can just keep getting more and more detailed with this section. And as you do more projects, you're going to learn what other things you can add into here that's going to keep you protected on the next project. But everything related to the deliverables and how big this project is going to be, that's all going to go in the scope of work section. Next, we have term. The term section states how long you'll be working together. Now, you can either assign a specific end date for the working relationship or create a clause that states that the relationship ends whenever the project ends. This is more likely to happen when working on projects that could take months and there's no clear end date in sight. Now we get to the payment section. This is another section you want to be very careful as a freelancer to protect your money. You want to protect your money as much as you want to protect your time. This section establishes how much the client needs to pay you and how long they have until the payment is due. So if you want to protect yourself from late payments, this is the section to do it. You can say that you want to be paid in 7 days or 14 days or however many days you want to be paid in. You can state that in your contract, and you can also even add a late fee penalty. So if you really want to protect yourself from a client paying you late, you can discourage those late payments by adding in that late fee penalty. One other thing you can add in your contract is a deposit. You can add a 25% deposit or even a 50% deposit if you wanted, so that the client has to pay 50% of the cost up front, and that way if a late fee happens, it's not so devastating because you already have half of that payment right up front. Next, we have the termination clause. A lot of things can go wrong during a project, so if either party needs to terminate the agreement early, this clause states how much time you need to notify the other party up front before the contract ends. So if the client happens to end the contract on you early, this gives you a bit of time to search out new clients if this relationship is about to end. A lot of freelancers will add a kill fee to this section, so in case the contract is ended early, you'll still get paid for the materials you worked on up to that point. You may not make the full amount, but it definitely takes some of that sting away. This next section is called cooperation. Basically, this section just means that you're going to give it your all when working for the client, and the client agrees to give you the information and anything else you need to complete the job. Next, we have a very important section, proprietary information, also known as ownership or copyrights. And because it has to do with copyrights and private information, this is always going to be a very long section of the contract. This clause ensures the client that the materials you create for them are exclusive and won't be sold to other businesses to use. You're also agreeing not to disclose any private information or secrets related to their products or services. In most cases, this is fine. Like if you're a writer, it's common to release all ownership to the company. But let's say you're a photographer or a journalist. In those cases, you may want to negotiate a licensing agreement. So it really just depends on your industry. However, there's one important thing to note in this section. Freelancers need a way to show future clients proof of their work by adding the latest projects to their portfolios. So make sure that you ask for permission and get it in writing that you're able to show your work to other clients, just so long as you aren't selling it to other businesses. This next section is limitation of liability. This is one of those sections that will really protect you as a freelancer. This explains that neither party is liable for things like loss of profit, loss of revenue, loss of product, or any consequential damages of any kind. Sections like this are exactly why it's good to use a legally vetted contract template. Otherwise, it can get complicated quickly. That is, unless you happen to be fluent in legalese. Another important clause is the indemnification clause. This indemnifies you against future losses made by the client. That way, if your client makes a mistake, you're not an agent of that company, and therefore you won't be the one paying for it. And then for freelancers specifically, we want to cover the independent contractor terms. This section is important because it lays out what your working relationship with the client looks like. For example, that you'll be using your own equipment, deciding how duties are performed day to day, and responsible for your own taxes, as well as providing your own benefits. Most likely as a freelancer, you're going to be using your own equipment, but some clients may have a specific software that they want you to use, depending on your industry. And this is the section where they'll state that in the contract. So while the scope of work keeps the client from giving you additional work that you didn't agree upon, this section keeps the client from overseeing how you perform your duties from day to day. And the last section is just a general section. This is basically a catch-all for any extra clauses you want to add, such as a guarantee that you won't solicit the client's employees to come work for you. The severability clause is another important one. This makes each clause independent from each other so that if for any reason one of the sections of the contract becomes invalid, the rest of the contract can still be enforced. This is important for freelancers because it means that, for instance, the client will still have to abide by your payment terms or scope of work, even if another part of the contract becomes invalid. There's also the force majeure clause, which states that the contract ends if anything out of your control keeps you or your client from completing the contract on time or at all. Like, let's say a natural disaster strikes, or a war breaks out, or a third-party power failure, or anything else. And arbitration is another major clause you'll want in your contract, which means you'll settle disputes outside of the courthouse with a neutral third party who will give a final verdict on the matter. And last but not least, the signatures. No contract can be enforced without getting a signature from your client. So be sure to have your client sign the contract, otherwise the contract isn't binding. I recommend using a contract that has electronic signatures, which is great because the client can sign it immediately without having to print the contract out, sign it, and scan it back. So it saves a lot of time, meaning you can seal the deal and get to work faster. And that's it. Now you have a professional contract to keep you protected with all your future clients. You'll find that a lot of what goes in your contract can just be copied and pasted to all of your future clients. Just make sure that you change the contact information and the scope of work to fit the project for your client. For even more tips, you can check out our other articles on this topic in the description box below. You can also find a link in the description to Indy's free contracts tool that'll help you create a professional contract in minutes. That's the tool that I used to create the contract in this video. And if you're just starting out in your freelancing journey or you're looking for advice, hit that subscribe button. Indy is a company of freelancers just like you, and we want to give you the advice that we learned along the way to help you grow your business. So let us know in the comments below what you want to know more about, and I'll see you next time.